Record to cloud. So it is recording. All right, so this is the pandemic update for August 31st. And so the format typically has been that I talk for a few minutes to give sort of an update as to what's happened over the last month. We do a little bit of comments on that or talking about that. And if there's anything else that people have noticed coming up in terms of trends, they can talk about that. Then for the rest of the forum session, then I turn the recording off so that people can have the freedom to participate in any way that they feel fit. So as far as the news goes, so, you know, the little Saturday night news, I should have my little paper and everything. Last month, I talked about how science are pushing the CDC and the WHO to recognize the aerosolization of the virus, you know, how it's in the tinier droplets than what the two organizations recognize. And that's now starting to hit the popular press more. The issue is significant for us because it's really confirming some of the things that I've been saying, some of the things that the people on the COVID Facebook group have been saying, which is that aerosolization is a major transmission way for the virus to transmit, and that it stays in the air longer. And so making sure that we have ventilation and all of those safety kinds of things, the proper masks and all that, does make a difference for us. The big news this month is that the CDC put out, then partially walked back, that if a person is exposed to COVID but not symptomatic, that they don't need to be tested. Well, the big concern with that, not doing that, is that how do you track and how do you stop the spread? Because 40% of people can be asymptomatic and carry the virus. Well, now the CDC is saying that people may want to consider being tested, even though that's not really helpful either. And how that impacts us is that in our practices, we may want to insist the person be tested to ensure that they aren't an asymptomatic carrier, or not treat anyone who's been exposed in the last 14 days. You know, that comes back to those questions that we ask before we treat people, because that's something to pay attention to. The other piece of news that came out this last weekend, and one of my aggregate types of emails that I get on health alternative and complementary healthcare news, is that the Veterans Administration has put out a call for complementary medicine practitioners, including massage therapists. And to get more information on that, I just put it up in the chat room, which is if anyone, that if you want to work for the VA and get a good government job, blogs.va.gov/vantage/78108/78108 is a place to go. So that's a job opportunity if you're interested in looking for a job with the VA. And I know that in Missoula, they're planning on building a great big, huge new VA building. Maybe they will hire some massage therapists. And again, job opportunities for us is a good thing to take a look at. The next thing on my list here is that more science is showing that the 1 to 2 meter rule, the 3 to 6 feet, because depending upon which organization you follow, they say that social distancing is 1 meter, and another one, CDC, I think it is, says it's 2 meters or 6 feet or so, the 3 to 6 feet. And so the British Medical Journal talks about different risk factors, because what basically is happening is that the science is showing that 1 to 2 meter rule is kind of arbitrary and comes out of really, really old science. And so the British Medical Journal talks about different risk factors other than distance. Like, for example, is the place where you are low occupancy or high occupancy, just, you know, 1 or 2 people or a lot of people? Is it indoor versus outdoor? How well is the space ventilated? And there's a nifty chart on some risk factors, and I am putting that in the chat box too, which is www.bmj.com/content/370/bmj.m3223. So that's another place where something for us to keep track of. They talk about what is high risk, low risk, poor risk, you know, that kind of stuff. And of course, what we do is pretty high risk, which a lot of massage therapists in my reading are working outside, which is a potential until, you know, winter hits here or fall hits or the next 15 minutes. There's a really nifty chart about those risk factors in there that might be helpful. Long haulers continue to be in the news. These are the people who get COVID and don't recover quickly. Here's a paragraph from an article in The Atlantic. It says that a German study that included many patients who recovered at home found that 78% had heart abnormalities after 2 or 3 months. A team from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found that a third of 270 non-hospitalized patients hadn't returned to their usual state of health after 2 weeks. And for comparison, roughly 90% of people who get the flu recover within that same time frame. And another quote is, they suggest that in the United States alone, which has more than 5 million confirmed COVID-19 cases, there are probably hundreds of thousands of long haulers. But these long COVID folks, they call it long COVID, as these folks call it, continues to be under-recognized. And if you for the impact for us is that if you run into folks who just seem to have lingering symptoms, turn them toward Facebook groups for support. Like there's a group called the COVID-19 Long Haulers Discussion Group. I'll put that in the chat too, so you can see that one. See, I'm actually getting a little bit better. This is my next step of being able to put this kind of stuff in the chat. And so they can get support from groups like like on Facebook. And along that same lines, a different article that was in BMJ, the British Medical Journal, estimates the number of long haulers to be about 10%. And so that means that that's a significant number of people who might come to our practices, and something for us just to pay attention to, that we can maybe potentially steer them towards some resources for support for them if that's the case. For support in your practice, I'm almost done here. There's only 2 things left on my list. So for support in your practice, the September-October issue of ABMP's journal has an article by Ruth Warner titled COVID-19 Related Complications, Implications for Massage Therapy. And all of those articles around COVID are available for free from abmp.com. You just need to provide your email address. And so you can, if you don't subscribe to the journal, you can still get a lot of those articles for free. And this particular article is of note, because it talks about the coagulopathy, what we talked about last month, the acute liver injury, acute kidney injury, muscle and joint pain, heart problems, and other issues. So I think that that's something helpful for us to take a look at. And then the last thing to pay attention to in terms of guidelines for your practice and what you're doing and what your clients are doing is that another thing to keep in mind is state versus county guidelines, because they can differ, and the county, if they are stronger than what the state is doing, then the county rules rule. Whereas if the county tries to dilute what the state is doing, then the state rules. Okay, so for example, on the state's mandate on face coverings, the state says that a face shield counts as a face covering, so a person can either wear a mask or a face shield. Okay, but here in Missoula County, I know Rose is shaking her head like, no, that's not good, because face shields really don't stop the spread of droplets or aerosols, whereas masks do. But that's what the state is saying, is that you can either wear a mask or you can wear a face shield. But here in Missoula County, that's not the case. If a person wears a face shield, they also have to wear the mask. It's not an either or proposition here in Missoula. It's you wear a mask, period. So just paying attention to what's going on with your county rules can also be important to talk about too. Okay, so that's all I have on my update at all. Is there anything that people would like to add, or you have questions about, or anything like that? Going once? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Rose.
Thanks, Deb. No, that was great. I thought the state was requiring masks.
They are, or you can do face shields, because what they're
God, I didn't know that.
requiring is face coverings. And then they define what a face covering is.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Yeah, and in fact, that happened, that was brought to people's attention. I went into Rose Hours, and then on a different Missoula COVID group that's not for massage therapists, but is part of the Missoula Rises stuff, it sort of came out of that. They said, hey, Rosars should be wearing, people in Rosars shouldn't be wearing face shields. They should be wearing masks. And then that whole difference came to light in terms of drawing it to my attention in terms of, yeah, they should be wearing masks. And then I went out and looked at the state guidelines, and no, it's a face shield or a mask. But again, in Missoula, Rosars was in the wrong because they really needed to be wearing masks in addition to the face shields or masks alone. So that's just something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Anything else that you've been noticing? Any trends? Okay, so that'll end the recorded portion of the evening. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn the recorder off, and then we can go from there.